Well, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 24 hours, you've probably heard the news that it looks like Arcade1Up is ceasing operations and most employees' last day will be tomorrow. Of course, we talked about this news when it broke last night and the rumors and speculation from the leaked emails. Since then, we have some secondary confirmations on the email. P-Dub's Arcade Loft received his own independent copy from another beta member. If you want to check out his video and take a look at that. And just earlier today, our buddy Glenn over at GRS talked about his insiders at Basic Fun that seem to confirm that they may indeed be acquiring the Arcade1Up brand and things associated with Arcade1Up, but they're real iffy on whether that includes the Infinity game table. So that may be a product line we see vanish in any coming change with Arcade1Up. So today, thanks to our buddy Stupid Fat Hobbit, a comment he left that I saw early this morning on that live stream from last night about looking back at Arcade1Up and the positive things that they brought us throughout their tenure. So tonight, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to look back at the last 7 years of Arcade1Up, kind of look at the positive things they did. None of us would have these big arcade, these arcade rooms in our basements with 10, 15, 25, 30 cabs if it weren't for Arcade1Up. So hope you'll join us tonight as we reminisce and look back in memoriam at Arcade1Up. All right, all right. I want to thank everybody for being here. Of course, this is the show where you go to get the news, the speculation, and none of the biased sales pitches. Our muzzles are off here all the time. Nobody muzzles us. So let's get into it. And before we do, I just want to say hi to everybody that dropped by already in the chat. We have Scaredy Cat Arcade who says game over. John Fritz was here nice and early. Steve Sale is here, and a shout out to Steve Sale, and more shout out to everybody that donated this past Sunday in our multi-hour streamathon organized by Michael B. the Game Genie. You guys helped raise a ton of money, and it was a ton of fun. So if you haven't watched any of those, go back and watch them. Of course, donations are still open, so you can still give. It was a blast. We had a great time. You'll notice some YouTubers are less facial hair, less hair on the top of their head. Some may still be hungover. It was a lot of fun if you missed it. And of course, Stupid Fat Hobbit is here, as well as Thumper Squid, who is watching the Gamer Awards. And here's a spoiler. I'm pretty sure I heard that Claire Obscura 33 basically won every category. Darren Kane is in the house. Always nice to see Darren, of course, a former Arcade1Up employee. So it's always nice to see him around. We have Duke Dog or Duck 3 Dog is here. Thanks for dropping by. Says, don't work. I have the leaked list for what Arcade1Up was going to release in 2026. There you go. And my guess is the answer was nothing. Doc Frag is here. He says, greetings. Thanks for dropping by. Alan Jones is a new member. Thanks for dropping by. Of course, as a member, you get access to all those fun little emojis in the chat. Also, we, of course, do various members-only videos and posts, so stay on the lookout for those. And thank you for dropping by, sir. We have R Burgers here, MSU Rich, Sir Sega, who I super appreciate for helping me get my Nova Blast squared away, dealing with the JAMA stuff that I'm kind of a newbie at, so really appreciate that. King Ed AV is here, and of course, the moderator of all moderators, the moderator extraordinaire, Jason Little Alien. Perfect Storm Gaming is here, who just had a very cool live stream guest. Was it earlier this week with the one of the expert guys around the what I'm going to say it wrong, like the MH380 flight, that one from, like, forgetting the country that disappeared several years back. Pretty cool. Hanging out, talking about that stuff and playing video games. Let's see. Let's see. Zero Redux is here. He says it's hard to say goodbye. Little boys to men. The real Zim is in the house. The fake Zim was here earlier, but we kicked him out so that the real Zim could be here. Unchained is here. JJ is here. B Kirby is here. Thanks for dropping by. Of course, Joe Cade is in the house. Michael B, the Game Genie, dropped by. We have Stock Jock, who said, because I told to be here by the Michael B, the Game Genie. There you go. Gramps Arcade, Marine 50, Port of Dreams. Yeah, here for the unofficial eulogy. That's exactly right. We have Jacob Baranowski. Thanks for dropping by. Game Awards are live. Who cares about Arcade1Up? Well, not a big fan of award shows, so glad they give awards. I find the shows themselves extremely boring. But I will be watching the commercials that are costing people $500,000 to $1 million a minute, probably tomorrow. Stitches by Steve is here. Dan Z is here. Appreciate all of you for being here tonight. And of course, as I said, tonight we are giving a look back. We want to hear from all of you. This is sharing our stories, right? So the chat really need your involvement throughout this, because we're going to talk about some of the big moments and the memories we have of Arcade1Up. Mostly good, little bad. Can't really talk about the history of Arcade1Up without mentioning some of the rough patches, but we're really here to talk mostly about the good stuff. Obviously, a lot of people are losing their jobs tomorrow, which is never a good thing. Unfortunately, it's all too common in the gaming space right now. And so shout out to them. Nobody wants to see anybody have to deal with that. Jason NSS dropped by. And so really, in Real Retro 530 is here. Thanks for dropping by. And Josh also dropped in the chat. Says, I own about 21 ups. I've only ever parted with one, Joust, and I regret selling it. That is super interesting. In fact, I just sold my first 3/4 arcade this weekend. I actually finally was able to move my WrestleFest. That took a long time for a brand new cab, but it is gone. So let's jump in here, and I'll try to get this in a way. Of course, I want to preface this by saying that the first segment of these are all AI. So any pictures that may depict real people in them are not real. They are just AI representations. But I really wanted some images that depict some of these events in a more realistic manner as we look back, and someday I'll learn how to spell in memoriam. I don't know how many times I always throw that U in there instead of the A, but there you go. We will get that fixed one day in this brain. And big shout out to B Kirby for gifting 20 James Hates Everything's memberships. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Very nice of you. Jen Rummy says it was a good run. Rip. Waiting for Vince McMahon. J Rod is here, and as well as Soggy Kid. All right, so what I wanted to start off with is really talking about my first encounter with Arcade1Up, and I'd love to hear your guys' story. What was the first time you ever saw something from them? For me, it all started with that first Street Fighter Championship Edition. I can remember walking in to Walmart, going through the games section like I always do, right? Got to check out the video games, got to check out the toys. And as I'm in the gaming section, I see, what is this? There's a little arcade of Street Fighter. And I thought, how freaking cool is this? And I was blown away. The only reason I didn't buy one right then and there was because of how small it was. This was before the risers, before all of that. And I just thought, how cool is that? Unfortunately, it's too small for me. It's for little kids or whatever. But I can remember that day almost like it was yesterday, because of the impact it made of seeing not just an arcade in Walmart that was for sale for what was, I believe at the time was like $199, maybe $249, but I believe it was $199, and thinking, wow, that's super cool that somebody was able to build like this smaller arcade that you could pick up and put in your home. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. But as I mentioned, it wasn't my first cab. It was just the first time I saw Arcade1Up and really got to see somebody actually doing these things. Let's see here. We have Soggy Kid says, yeah, I remember the first wave. I was bummed they didn't have light up marquees. Stringer Films, thanks for dropping by, says, my first time was in a Walmart dressing room. Wrong first time, but I appreciate that. Masri Arcade says, for me, it was the Street Fighter 2 machine on display in Walmart. I thought it was the coolest. Darren says, pretty sure I first heard of them in the Old Maid New Facebook group. That's kind of cool. Fat Hog is here. For the Zim, who is a big fan of Street Fighter, said Big Blue did it for him. Soggy says the first one he bought was MK2, and that actually is my first Arcade1Up 2 as well, only it was way later. It was the MK2 Legacy. That was the first one I actually bought, and that was my gateway drug into buying way too many of these things. Mad Dog says Happy Canine is here. Jason says his first was the Tempest. Porter Dream says I ran into one-ups in Walmart. My wife and I lived with my in-laws at the time, and they already hated how much real estate my other collections took up, so I couldn't start collecting till we got our house. Yeah, I can only imagine, man. These things take up a lot of room. Jason says, I still have my original Final Fight one-up cab. The looks of it still give me nostalgia. That is awesome. And Masri points out they were $3.99 in Canada. It looks like Zero's first was also Final Fight and went back the next day for Pac-Man. I believe the one-ups prior to the risers were called the RGT 85s. So true. Retro Tech X only ever considered the TMNT. Love these stories, man. My first one-up was Star Wars. I passed on the Gen 1. And Ezekiel here with the $9.99 super chat. He says, I have to thank Arcade1Up and its community. It revived the arcade enthusiast in me, a cheap gateway drug you buy outside your local 7-Eleven. Say then I moved on to the good stuff from Colombia. Really appreciate the super chat. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is, right? I mentioned Sir Sega. I've been messing with this Unico Nova Blast like nonstop for several weeks. Like, the great thing I love about it is it's still Arcade1Up's height size because it's a sit down, right? It's a candy cab. So it's not heavy. It's easier to move around. I mean, it's still kind of heavy because it's all metal, but it comes in two pieces. So like very easily. And so it's like all the size and feel of the full size, of course, able to use the full size boards as well as modern stuff. And easily move it around, and it's all new equipment, so I don't have to worry about a lot of messing around with things failing other than maybe an old arcade board here and there. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, Arcade1Up is the gateway drug to the real thing. I kind of went the other way. I had my period. No, I didn't have my period. I had my era of arcades in the late 90s and early 2000s where I was really collecting a lot of the full size things, and they just became too big a hassle to move. I was moving too often. They're too big, always having to call people to help and all this stuff. And so eventually I just said I was done with the large ones. It was too much of a hassle. And Arcade1Up brought all that back uh, in an easy way that doesn't kill my back moving it around. But yeah, thanks for the super chat, Ezekiel. Always nice to see you. And all right, so the the next one I wanted to talk about really was kind of the first time we saw Arcade1Up do this exclusivity thing with big box retailers that they would, or these specifically the discount stores like Costco and Sam's Club. They would make this a staple of their product lineup for a long time, much to people's chagrin. You would get the standard version of a arcade cabinet over, at Best Buy, and then you would go to Sam's Club and the same cabinet would come with a stool for like the same price. Or in some cases, it might come with a stool and an anti-fatigue mat. But these were kind of really the first ones out of the gate, these exclusive ones way back in like that 2018 time frame. I believe that's around this. But basically those Gen 1 exclusives towards the end of that wave, really kind of just had to call those out because it did become such a big part of what Arcade1Up continued to be with these things. Interestingly enough, you see here the Asteroid Centipede, which we've seen a XL version of this in prototype form from Basic Fun. So very interesting. The exact same kind of cab, just in a more modern form factor. Can't help but wonder if that's the exact same designer, because maybe it actually is. So Zero, all these are AI generated. I tried to preface that at the beginning. So I wanted real looking pictures to kind of focus on the memory of these things, right? So any real people you see in here, and there will be some images of real people coming up, they're all fake. They didn't actually happen, but they're meant to represent that time frame, that era, or those events. So yeah, 2018, the Atari 12-in-1. It was my first. Look at the price in your image, $299. How is Asteroid Deluxe with no riser the same size of the Centipede? Because AI is not very good at scale. I think we all watched ETA Prime mod video. Absolutely. Yep, it's AI up. Do these cabs come with the $5 roast chicken? Yes, they probably did. Sir Sega says, I remember getting a Super Pac-Man with LED light kit for $265 at Costco. That's awesome. And of course, yes, ETA Prime mod video. Who doesn't remember that? Ritual Dello is here. Stringer says his first one up was on a floor model Asteroids, just like that. That's awesome. So moving ahead, right, we're going to slide into 2019. And 2019 is important because this is the influx, really, I believe, of when Arcade1Up started getting this venture investment, right? They made such an impact in 2018 that the money started rolling in, and that allowed them to really step up their game. And so they showed up at CES in 2019 with a lineup, with their new lineup, right? We saw the first MK2. We saw Golden Tee Classic at that CES. And of course, that's the first time we see Karate Champ. Interestingly enough, at that CES, some of the other things that Arcade1Up was showing off, some came to be, some did not. Of course, you had the wall signs based on the marquees that they did sell a few of. You had plushies. They had Arcade1Up Pac-Man and Pac-Man Ghost plushies. They were throwing all kinds of stuff at the wall at this point, building all kinds of prototypes and various toys, and all debuted at CES 2019. Many never actually made it into the stores, but this is where you started seeing the countercades for the first time appear, and all of this stuff back then. JJ says 2019 is when Retro Ralph and Console Kits had their weekly A1Up show that John D seemed to be on every other week. Man, those first few years were golden. Then mistakes were made. Duke's Dog says, if I never bought my one up, I never got Rush 2049 and helped launch me into buying more crap that can't fit in my garage. There you go. Are we pouring a drinky poo or two at this Memorial, James? Yes, definitely pour one out for Arcade1Up. A week later, he got his NBA Jam. That's awesome. And he got it. I got that Asteroids for $50. That's a deal, man. Of course, I got lots of great deals from Walmart. That's where I got my Simpsons for $192. When that was on blowout, I believe it was 192, or maybe it was 125. I can't remember what they were blowing it out for now. It's been so long ago. B. Kirby says 2019 is really when he got into it. Hey, Israel, what do you think of my Nintendo Switch 2 arcade kiosk, brother? He's talking, of course, he got the G.I. Joe Build-A-Cade and went with a Nintendo Switch 2 theme, which is pretty damn cool. It's pretty cool. Check out that short. When are you going to post the full video on it? Because it is smoking. More drinks. And I wish weekly one-up was still a thing. Well, it kind of is under a different name. There's another John D joint out there, if you know what I mean. A week later, I turned into NBA Jam. The one-up jam didn't come until 2 years later. And he's almost done editing, so stick around or stay tuned for Israel Gaming's video on his Build-A-Cade, because it's pretty unique. I don't think anybody could have guessed that one would get built right out of the gate, so that's pretty awesome. So CES 2019 wasn't enough. Arcade1Up had to top it in the second half of the year when they showed up at E3 in 2019 with some bangers. Of course, the 4-player TMNT, Marvel superheroes, and the one arcade to rule them all, the Star Wars cab, which some of the best cabs they've released, of course, Star Wars, TMNT, just really awesome. And again, I wish E3 was still a thing. Instead, we just get the Gamer Awards instead of the real E3. It's the biggest gaming event now, apparently. But again, these were awesome. And I can remember seeing Star Wars for the first time in Nebraska Furniture Mart, and it was all I could do not to buy it right then and there. And I didn't. Sadly, I didn't. And didn't go back, didn't go back until later when I wanted to get my first Arcade1Up, and they were long gone by that point, which was disappointing. Soggy Kid says Retro Ralph and Console Kits, I remember those guys. At one point I had 20 of those things, was getting them for 75, 50, and sometimes a penny or 10 cents or from Walmart between Atlanta and Birmingham. Flipped them all. That's awesome. A lot of people made a lot of money with Arcade1Up over the years. JJ says still makes my head spin to think Walmart was selling the Star Wars cab for $50. Yeah. Like, people that got that for $50 got a damn good deal, especially because now, like, to get one, you're talking $1,000 almost. Chris Nooner says in May 2020, I got my first one up. By September, I was 3 or 4 deep, if I remember correctly. S- Stitches by Steve says, I had the Marvel and the first debut of Star Wars. Yeah, whoever got the Star Wars cab for $50 got the best deal ever. Best one-up deal was the 175 Blitz clearance at Sam's Club. That was a great deal as well. Fortunately, I pre-ordered Blitz, so I got a fancy hat, but I got to pay like $400 more than everybody else. The bad guy is here, and he says the TMNT and Star Wars were my first two cabinets. Still have them. And Jason has he's going to sell his working Tempest PCB now to put his kids through college. Indeed. King Ed's first A1-Up was the Miss Pac-Man cocktail table. Absolutely loved it. Used to have a real arcade Galaga cocktail table in my younger life. A1-Up did a very nice job with their version. Yeah, I really liked the cocktail tables. They were just a little too short for me, so I would have needed a riser for the cocktail table. But I love cocktail tables, and I wish they had made like an XL cocktail table, not a pub table, but one that was like sized for adults. Stringer used all his A1-Up profits to buy full sized. That's the way to do it. Use the flip to fund the good collections. Not that they're not all good, but the ones good to you, right? The ones you really want. So now as we leave 2020, we're going into 2019, we're going into 2020. And some of the more interesting things, right? This is when they first debut the sit down versions. And of course, Outrun and Star Wars. And these are really the only two that they would ever release. And so it's fun to look back on Arcade1Up at this time when they were trying different experiments, coming up with unique ways to make the games more immersive. And these are, of course, a special call out to these because these are both two really sought after cabs still today. In fact, I believe G.I. Joel has a conversion kit for the Outrun to turn it from the sit down to a kind of more deluxe looking version. And, you know, what can you say? Star Wars is Star Wars. Outright, yeah, I guess I didn't catch that one there, Fat Hog. It is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the kick plate and the marquee, but close enough. B Kirby says he still has 22 cabs, 6 partycades, a few countercades, 2 cocktail tables, and the Pong pub table. And yeah, Zim says we got to get a few games in with Bad Guy before they turn the servers off. So hopefully they don't turn them off, but you never know. Ezekiel says he sold all his 1-ups to buy a 6-player X-Men. That is awesome. 6-player is a beast. Stringer says Star Wars was the best game they ever made, hands down. It is definitely gold. Looks like Tony C still has his Star Wars sit down. Nerd says the Star Wars is still my favorite release by them, though mine is modded now. Tron Tempest and even Dragon, or I assume DL is Dragon's Lair, for the looks. B Kirby had both, and Doc Frag says my second cab was the Marvel 1 cab. Realized my addiction at that point. Absolutely. Resd Out says he still has the Street Fighter 2 in box, never opened for years. Yeah, it might end up being a collector's item now. You never know. Jason says he will not be getting rid of his Star Wars. And I'm selling my 1-ups to build the grid. There you go. So then I think another big point in history of Arcade1Up is when really, I would say it's really the first time that Arcade1Up actually heard us, right? They like to go around and say, we hear you and we're listening. But this was the first time I think that they actually did listen and made changes on it. And of course, we talked about the Karate Champ, which debuted as a prototype at CES 2019. But it was at this point in 2020 when the cab became a reality. It wasn't just a prototype at a trade show, it was now burger time. They heard, even though it was Scott Bacharach, the founder of Tastemakers, the head honcho, the guy who owned the Kit and Caboodle, even though Karate Champ was his dream cab, that was his special one for him, the one he had nostalgia for, he listened to the community that said, hey, Burger Time as the marquee title would be way better. And they listened and they made one of the most epic cabs they made from a shape standpoint. It had its issues. It had those extra joysticks because it had Karate Champ on there. But aside from that, it was a beautiful cab. It was one of the first that they got away from that swan design. Obviously they did that with Turtles and Star Wars, but this one was such an elaborate design. It was a big deviation. And of course, it is now one of the most sought after cabs in the aftermarket because they only made a limited amount of them. And so now picking one of these up used is going to run you over $1,000, let alone if you can find one still in the package. But it was important, right? This was a big time when Arcade1Up got themselves even more credibility with the community because they showed they would listen and they would be making improvements and continual improvements, which we would see continue to happen for some time. Naughty List MG says a pile of 1UP cabs are now worth the list. No, actually, from what I've seen, just a quick sampling of new listings today on eBay, it seems the prices are actually already spiking. So we'll see if anybody wants to actually pay those absorbent rates. But it looks like with news of Arcade1Up's impending closure that some of these things are going up in value even, so that will be interesting. Zim says he still has a big blue unopened in box from the charity event, of course talking about the Red Cross charity event. I don't actually have that in the slide deck, but that was obviously a big moment for both the YouTube community and Arcade1Up and the Red Cross. That was a very big event that people loved. People got great deals on everything from Big Blue to Tron and all kinds of good stuff. And so I know that is looked on fondly from that time period. Unchained says, who doesn't wish they had that sweet Rampage shark fin cab right now? Said nobody. Exactly. Rezzed Out says, didn't know they made all these. Yeah, they've made a lot of cabs over the years. Bill says he loves his Star Wars 1UP. I have the 2nd gen version. That is the version I have as well, Bill. I prefer the 2nd gen because it's got the full front artwork on it and not the old style with the labels. But I know a lot of people like the labels from the original. But I really like the look of the 2nd gen better myself. Stockjock says, I'll be up to take the burger time off your hands now. Yeah. Nina says, we hear you like a teen hears their parents in one ear and out the other. Exactly. Darren says he started at Arcade1Up in February of 2020, just as Burger Time was about to ship. Very cool. Karate Champ is better. Just ask Frank Ducks. It would have been cool if they also released Karate Champ later, right? Like it would have been, I'd have bought both of them. But I missed that era though. I'm not a big fan of the shark fin on the Karate Champ. When I saw X-Men, I knew they were serious. Technically, you can't buy 1UPs anymore from the company, so the value should increase on some cabs. It's considered rare now. It'll be interesting to see if in any acquisition, assuming if Glenn's insiders are true, if the rumors from earlier are true that Basic Fun is indeed acquiring a lot of the IP, if with that they re-release, if they use the designs, original designs, obviously it seems like they're working with the original design team already, so it would be interesting to see if they take some of those original designs, make improvements on them, and re-release some of these cabs that haven't been around for a long time. Can wax about the wisdom in that acquisition some other time. We're here to kind of like just reminisce about the good old days. um and let's see. B Kirby still has his Burger Time, Tron, Dragon's Lair, Frogger, and Special Edition Marvel Superheroes. Burnt Oranges says all of those plus KI Pro. That was like 3 years ago. Outrun $50 waterlog special, right? Didn't Bobby Vu buy all of those? Um, I look back and wish we had a lot of the Proto Cabs 720 Rampage. Oh yeah, and the Spy Hunter 720, that Pong. There was a lot of the 6-player X-Men, all super cool. Aren't you a little old for video games? I bet you could get 2K for the Burger Time now. Of course, Stock Jock says he is the Holy Trinity, Star Wars, Tron, and Dragon's Lair. Yeah, I missed out on Tron. I just kept waiting for it to go on sale. That $700 price was too high for me, and then it never did it? And then it was just gone. Can't wait to add Buy Stuff's waterfall deck to his Star Wars. Yep, and of course, B Kong obviously got really big around his modding of the Star Wars deck back then. I like the original, didn't stretch the side art, but love the lighted coin door on the 2023. Dragon's Lair value will go up. Hang on to those. 4-player X-Men is the only one I wish I hadn't gotten it. Yeah, I got my 4-player X-Men several months back earlier this year off of Facebook Marketplace, brand new for $100 because it wouldn't start up for the guy. And turned out it was just a little cable from the control panel to the PCB. Replace that cable, which Arcade1Up sent me for free, and it worked great. So that's one of my biggest scores. For $100 for the X-Men was awesome, because it was even after the X-Men, you couldn't get it anymore. These one-ups will only gain value assuming Basic Fun doesn't re-release the same cabs. Should be playing piano music in the background, reminiscing of the good old days. That's right. Doubt they have the licenses. Yeah, I doubt they get the licenses with them. My assumption is Arcade1Up has let most of the licenses lapse. They would have to go secure new licenses, but Basic Fun has relationships with a lot of these companies already with their miniature arcade classics lines. So it's not too much of a stretch to think they could convince Data East and some of these other companies to relicense it. Obviously, Quarter Arcades just did a Burger Time this past year. So, they're out there to be had if they think they can make the money. Yeah, start scanning your local Ollies. That's funny. Getting's Dragon's Lair isn't expensive and certainly would look great as an XL. Yep. I totally agree. I would love to get an XL Dragon's Lair, or just a Space Ace to go next to my other one. Dragon's Lair is one of the smaller ones. Darren Kane, your NDA expires after tomorrow. Can you just show us some unseen prototypes like Hydro Thunder? That's hilarious. XL Dragon's Lair would be a buy. A lot of people agree with Jason. So does your hat go up in value now? Hey, it might, or Basic Fun might go after me for having a hat with their new IP if they did buy it. Track and Field. Oh, talk about one of my greatest acquisitions, right? Getting the prototype, one of the 2 prototypes of Track and Field. Would have been great to get that released, but they just couldn't get over that art issue. Or get somebody to buy it, apparently, because it's always their excuse, which doesn't make any sense. Oh, wait, someone does have that. Indeed. Since there's some Think Up folks over at Wonderland, and Wonderland is expanding beyond pinball, it would be interesting to see them acquire the Infinity Game Table, since it is a Think Up design. Yeah, and with Glenn's Insider saying it's real iffy whether Any company acquiring the IP even wants this basic or the Infinity game table, you got to wonder if Think Up, who really sued Arcade1Up over that table, wouldn't want it back in their repertoire. My X-Men was the target price error, which they hadn't honored. Okay. Dragon's Lair sucks, says Ichabod. Uh, X-Men is one of the best cabs. Tron says Best Buy had Tron go on sale for $4.99 on the same day that I got my very next paycheck after learning that Tron Arcade1Up was a thing that existed. Yeah, I must have missed that deal because that would have been great. No, your hats are now being donated to the needy like Super Bowl champion t-shirts. So true. They should have just taken my advice, but they didn't, did they? Wow. Chit for Brains, love the name, says I paid $2K for a Burger Time, but it's full size and has a 61 board plus a trackball. No way in hell I pay that for an Arcade1Up. Yeah, I think it's nuts that people would pay $1,000 or $2,000 for one of these, but they're paying it for some damn reason. All right, next up is one of the more interesting products that I think Arcade1Up jumped into. For me, one I had zero interest in. I did not like the way they looked. I thought they looked super goofy. But I know a lot of people still love these today. And in fact, they're turning to mystery encoder or team encoder, not mystery encoder, team encoder. And mystery encoder, of course, is the face we usually see or technically don't see to save theirs. And that, of course, is the line of digital pinball machines from Arcade1Up, which, of course, had Marvel, Star Wars, and Attack from Mars. And, of course, the Team Encoder mod helped people, get all these tables on one machine. They fluctuated in price, entered the market fairly affordable, quickly got unaffordable. And when you look at them next to the AtGames, even the original AtGames HD, it just wasn't comparable. And when AtGames dropped the 4KP and had the Zen license and stole Zen away from Arcade1Up, again, it wasn't even comparable. The AtGames product was just infinitely better. And so, for me, I just never had any interest in these, but I know a lot of people love them. People still play them today, microwaving them or not to keep them running. These are still pretty popular with a lot of people. So we have to pay tribute to, again, Arcade1Up really trying to do something different within the space and make virtual pinball fairly affordable. Obviously more affordable than what AtGames was doing, and definitely more affordable than what the customizers were doing. And yeah, so people love these. Of course, Soggy loved his. Rezzed Out says, dang it, I was hoping to eventually get a kiss if it was made. I have two of the A1Up pinball stock jocks, so by all means, yeah, there you go, stock jock. Buy stock jock, buy one Burger Time, get two virtual pinballs free. Duke Dog says if it didn't have that shape and height, yeah, the problem for me was how boxy they look. They're very shallow. And then of course the back box, the shark fin design on those was kind of goofy. But it is what it is. The AOP back box is awkward. Yeah, the original, definitely small. Love the looks of these, but just too small. That's where I was at. The side art's great. Like the marquees look great, or the back glasses look great, but they're so small and awkward sized for me. I was not a fan. Too small. The AOP size was the way to go, but would still like a bigger 43-inch playfield. Stock Jock likes that deal, MG. So there you go. Bobby ALU says, I first got the Attack from Mars and thought it was great until I got the AtGames HD beside it. Yep. So had to pay tribute to those just because it was their play. It was different. Next up, we get into 2021, and of course, Arcade1Up is back at CES with some bangers, right? They show up with the X-Men 4-player. They show up with that special reserve Dragon's Lair. And of course, we get the KI Pro announcement. So again, Arcade1Up taking advantage of CES. Obviously, we know in 2020, CES wasn't a thing due to COVID and everything, but 2021, here they are back at the virtual CES, announcing some pretty massive cabs. Some of the best ones. I have all three of these that are pictured here. I can remember getting my KI on Black Friday. I I want to say they discounted it to $199 on Black Friday. And then at the same time, it wasn't this Black Friday. I think it was 2022, but they had a Black Friday sale on it. And then at the same time, a coupon code leaked out. So of like $50 off. So I ended up getting my KI for $150 direct from Arcade1Up, which was awesome because it came with the stool, all that stuff. Obviously, the special reserve Dragon's Lair, some of the best packaging they've ever done. But like Arcade1Up likes to do, they come up with weird names for some of these releases and then never use them again, whether we're talking about the Vault or the special reserve or whatever. So love the Dragon's Lair cab. It's so good. The only problem with it is just a little too small. It would be nice if that was just a little bigger. But other than that, it's awesome. I love having it. Looks great. And then of course we talked about X-Men already. Who doesn't love the Konami X-Men beat 'em up? It's certainly awesome. I bought the Dragon's Lair day one when it dropped. Still have it. Yep, Dragon's Lair was the private reserve. Yep. I thought they had Golden Tee. So at the same time, this is also when I think they announced the second Golden Tee at this time. I don't fully remember. I had a list, but these were the big ones in my opinion. Of course, the Golden Tee Classic was way before that. That's what she said. In 2021 was when the Hobbit hole was established. Finished my basement, picked up my first 8 cabs by Christmas. MK2, Street Fighter 2, TMNT, Big Buck, Golden Axe 2, Star Wars Pinball, Class of 81, and Golden Tee. I put my Dragon's Lair on a 6-inch booster. Much better. Yeah, it definitely needs boosted on that one. Man, they really ruined a good thing. That's just it, right? Zero. That's what's so disappointing is they had the world by the balls and they were making great stuff. They were just making dumb bets, right? They had too much cash and thought it came too easy for them. So they were doing some really silly things. Yeah, it was kind of a problem. They were practically giving away KI for under $200 at the same time. Advertising KI Pro would release several months later for only 5 times the price. That's exactly right. Yeah, one of their big missteps, announcing both simultaneously. Bill says, still kicking myself that I never got Dragon's Lair. That's one of the few I regret not getting. They really did zero. My Dragon's Lair is on a riser with a booster. Resdout says, congrats on those that never slept on these. It's always been a dream to have an arcade garage. Nooner says, had the world by the balls, but mistook it for bowels at times. Indeed. So then, of course, as Arcade1Up was known to do at the time when they had all this cash, right? They go from CES to E3, where they make their next wave of announcements, which of course famously was Tron, The Simpsons, The Turtles in Time, and the Ice Scraper, the Street Fighter 2 Big Blue. And I've skipped in all of this. I've skipped all the collab cabs. If you want to see the tribute to the collab cabs, I do have a live stream where we go through every single one. rank those. We also did a fun one where we just made our own collab cabs that we'd like to see. That was I enjoyed some of those streams. If you guys missed those were back a few years ago. They were a ton of fun. I really enjoyed doing those and making all those fake collabs. Some of them I thought were pretty damn funny. Some were just stupid and meant to be stupid. But it was a great time. I enjoyed those streams back then. Back before the dark times. Congrats on those that never slept. We did that one. Let's see here. We got Josh Dandy says, wish they would have kept the logos on the front of the Simpsons and Big Blue. KI Pro owner and not letting it go. Love the design for a 1-up. Thor KC says, wow, I have that whole lineup except for the Turtles. Wish I got Tron. You took the words right out of my mouth. Simpsons was the last A1-up I bought day one. Yes, the Simpsons. The great thing about the Simpsons is how easy it was to sideload those, right, with the mods for that, and you could just add all the other ones. So I never ended up getting any of the Turtles ones because I had added them to the Simpsons and had them all there along with tons of other great games, right? Like that's the ones I can play. Cowboys of Moo Mesa and Sunset Riders and just G.I. Joe and so many great cabs due to the hacks that people put out for that. 3/4 ain't bad. Golden Axe, Revenge of Death Adder 1-up would be hard for me to sell. That game has never been ported accurately until 1-up did it. Very cool. Don't kick yourself, Bill. Dragon's Lair isn't a great game. You just stare at it. I still need to get Simpsons. Darren says, I want to mention that Miss Pac-Man Mini thought it would never happen. The rights were too entangled. Kudos to John D for working out the deals. That half shark fin, half Konami cab shape isn't horrible. yeah, it is kind of warped in there with the AI's mind, right? Dragon's Lair, the first quick time video game, and back in the day, the biggest quarter muncher. I recall it being 50 cents. It had that laser disc player in there rather than 25, and the game lasted about 1 second. Yeah, I mean, you got one QT event. That's exactly right. I mean, you munched through quarters on that thing, and yet people still lined up to play and to watch because it was the first. You could play a cartoon. It was crazy. A Trojan Big Blue would have broken sales records. Well, funny enough, that was actually the Trojan cab was one of my collabs that I put together. But yes, it would have been awesome. As well as the the Blue Pill Pac-Man. Actually, I think it was a Blue Pill Miss Pac-Man, if I remember right. I regret selling my Big Blue and need to find it again. I was never a fan of the design of the Big Blue. However, there are a few people that have customized theirs. I know Chaotic has, but I saw one that was done really, really well that looked like the real thing when he was done with it. And that was the first like Big Blue I saw. I was like, that looks sharp. That looks pretty kick-ass. MG says he has the whole lineup still in the boxes. $150 party cades from QVC. Yeah, who remembers the days of you could actually get deals on QVC? Discovering the Catalina wine mixer. Good times. NBA Jam had to wait in lines to play back in the day. Oh yeah. Yeah, I caught an Outrun stand-up for $150, but the steering wheel was not going to hold up, so I let it be someone else's treasure. Those things are like Air Jordans. Look at them. Never use them. The partycades were a big deal on QVC for a couple holiday seasons. Yep. Oh, this is interesting. Kudos that John D almost got Donkey Kong and some idiot ruined it. I'd love to hear that story because I find that unlikely. But maybe he did. Join the ice scraper Illuminati. Indeed. And of course, we've talked about this one a couple times already. Who can't forget the Infinity game table when this came out? This is, to me, one of the silliest things. I know people love this. I think the idea is absolutely amazing. The execution is kind of crappy to me, and I'll tell you why. It's not anything to do with the design or what it is. First of all, it's $1,000 for this thing, which is nuts, absolutely nuts. That's way overpriced for what it is. Um, but it's not the kind of games that I would think would be great on this, right? When I think of the Infinity game table and a digital board game, I'm thinking much more elaborate board games like, whether it's Settlers of Catan or Dungeons and Dragons or some of these really popular, this same time frame is when board games exploded in popularity, right? They became huge. Like people wanted to play all these things around this era. And now you got board game stores all over town. Like people love these things and they're elaborate and they're constantly coming out with new ones. That is what would be ideal on this, in my opinion. Instead, it launches with a bunch of Hasbro games, which are all good, but you can all buy for under $10, brand new, right? And so you could buy every game that's on this from Hasbro for way less than you could buy the table itself and have the real physical game where your kids have to actually learn and play with the pieces and learn how to pick up after themselves and organize things and all that stuff. I get that it makes it easier, but let's be realistic. How do you play Uno on a digital screen and everybody sees your cards, even with those stupid little plastic things that cover them? People can still see them. It doesn't make any sense. And then when you span out and look at the games that were in the store, they're like grade D games, the additional ones that you could buy that people were doing. This wasn't being supported by big developers. And they wanted it to be, right? They wanted it to be this giant marketplace. But really, what you got is 57 versions of the game of memory by different random people. So to me, this is never really nurtured correctly, released correctly. And the price is just completely out of whack. But I know people loved it, especially people that got it secondhand or got it special. And so it's worth calling out. Obviously, it's a big part of what ThinkUp sued Arcade1Up over. It was their design. They came up with it. The store idea was a good one. You could generate all kinds of revenue, additional revenue off of one sale. But it must have sold really well because really this became the Arcade1Up's focus in the later years pretty heavily around the Infinity game table. But it had lots of problems, whether that was no battery or lack of portability. Like you can't just like fold this up and put it away if you don't want it in the middle of your room. Lots of interesting things. Doc Frag says, I'll never forget when Code Mystic revived a bunch of our bricked cabs from an online issue. That's nice of them. My nephew beat Galaga before. It was insane looking at stage 1000, whatever. He must have been different. Well, that's pretty cool. Zero says the Infinity was the beginning of the end. And I think you're probably right. My table has more hours on it than any other machine in the arcade besides pinball. Yeah, I have no doubt these are great, family things. I think like some of these board games like Chutes and Ladders and I say Monopoly, but I don't think that's on there, but maybe it is, are perfect for it. They're young kids games, right? Like Candy Lane, not that Monopoly is, but they're good. Like the experience I think would be good, but it's $1,000 and you can buy that game for $10. So it was one of those things like, I mean, if I got a great deal on it, if I got it like Fat Hog says for $300, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer price. That would be worth it. But the 1,000 was just insane to me for what you were getting. I would have bought that thing 1,000 times, but hearing so many people talk about it dying even more than the pinball. See, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. Mistakes were made, including the Partycade being a limited stock thing. Absolutely. That's another one that shot up to over $1,000. If it was actually that size, it would be cool. Yeah. Brother-in-law has an infinity table. It's fun, but Catan on it would have been great. Absolutely. Think about that. Catan, Ticket to Ride, so many great, fun board games. Mistakes were made. No Cubert, no Robotron, no Donkey Kong. Instead, making cabs like NFL Blitz that didn't sell, and the same fighting game and Pac-Man over and over and over and over again. Yep. I would love the Infinity game table, but not even close to $1,000. Darren Kane said, I definitely had conversations about Magic the Gathering, D&D, etc. for the IGT. Yeah, that would have been great. MTG would have been awesome. There is some really good digital versions. PDEP says over 100 in the chat. Thanks for dropping by in our little in memoriam to Arcade1Up, looking back on the good and the times. And you showed up in the right time because we're almost to the part of the show where we're going to take a look at then and now. MG got the Infinity game table because during COVID it would have been cool, but it came too late. I think it has Catan now. If it does, that would be cool. Blitz was a hit release. The money lost was using the NFL to promote it. And they really got screwed with Sam's Club discounting it almost immediately and letting it go to Sam's Club before all the people that pre-ordered it. It's fun to play, can't cheat, don't have to do the math, no pieces to set up or put away. The idea is right. I think the idea is okay. It's the cost that was for me, because once you got to that $1,000 price point, like to me, $10 for a game is a real game at Target around this time of year. Just made way more sense. How many games can you buy for $1,000 when you're paying $10 a pop? Donkey Kong was right by the time crisis at licensor events and a photo leaked. Then there was Arcade1Up staff member that had cabs in the background of TikToks. Nintendo sees everything. Well, there you go. There's a site here, Ohio, not sure if they have a presence elsewhere, called Bidfta, where you bid on Amazon returns. I've heard of sites like that. We don't have one. I know there's some in Arizona, but I don't know who else has them. I've seen the new Infinity game tables on there for half price. A big draw is that I love board games, but never have a chance to play with anyone else. Yeah, I guess online play is a good way, but a lot of these are also available on your cell phone and tablet too. So, where you can find people online to play all day long. They really took off after that porn hack release. There you go. It was a top 5 IP. It was one of the most requested cabs along with DK prior to release. Perhaps they overproduced, but you can't say it was a waste. MG paid $900. Ticket to Ride is on it, MG says. As soon as people learned how to unlock nudie photo hunt, sales increased. My wife wanted it, so LOL. But it does come with things to block your info in certain games. And while playing the 1K, I also received a coupon to buy another cab for $200. Well, that's a decent deal, at least. Please consider hitting the like button, Jason says. Someone should take the IGT idea to the next level and include one that has built-in card scanner camera so you can use real physical CCG cards that you own. That would be interesting. But in your opinion, did it have a chance of happening? I'm not sure what that you were referring to there. All right, so now we've taken, as somebody said, as Zero Redux said, right? This was about the time that Arcade1Up begins to take a turn. I saw Glenn in the chat earlier. We would be remiss if we didn't mention that. Of course, we mentioned earlier in this year is when the Tron first debuts. And so this is when we start seeing Arcade1Up start doing more controversial things, like whether that's the issues around Glenn's Tron stick, right? All the controversy around that starts lots of issues, obviously, Glenn has his position, which I, totally agree with. You have infighting in the community coming out of this because of the actions of Arcade1Up. and it's just creates a lot of controversy, right? In fact, long running controversy around the decisions and whatever went on with Glenn's Tron stick and Arcade1Up stealing his designs, or allegedly stealing his designs. Hashtag don't sue me. Hey, I guess that's not much of a risk if you're going out of business, but there you go. So we would be remiss if we didn't call that out. That was obviously a big blunder, I think, especially with the quote unquote diehard crowd around Arcade1Up. Everybody loves Glenn and the stuff he was doing, supporting Arcade1Up and this community as a whole until this point. And it just put a big divide out there and really fractured the community, got horrible PR for Arcade1Up, right? PR that people still are pissed about many years later. So huge mistake. Duke Dog says, I would have downgraded to fit more players on Hydro Thunder. There you go. So we have to mention that. We have to mention the Blitz and the MVC2 issues, right? This is some of John D's biggest releases, the big bets, right? Like, here's Blitz. Nobody thought we could do it. They go all out to get it done. It has an HD upgrade. They go do the regraphics, but they yank out the late hits, which I know some people were bothered about. I wasn't. And quite frankly, Blitz is still one of my favorite Arcade1Up products they ever made. I think it's super fun to play, but it launches with the promise of online play and no online play. And it takes forever to get online play up and going. But they finally did. And then when they did, they deleted all of our progress. So even though I had played through full seasons on a couple of the games already, they deleted all that, which pissed me off. I just don't know how you blunder that kind of stuff. But at least they brought online play at that point. And to me, it was a great cab. But as others had mentioned, right, they really screwed up the launch. They brought in NFL players to promote the thing, which it isn't cheap, right? Like all those individual personnel sponsorships, similar to what they did with like Shaq and that thing, licensing his likeness. Of course, he'll license himself to anybody apparently. But spent a lot of money. And as we mentioned, when Sam's Club put them on blowout sale like 2 weeks after they came out, it just destroyed the market. And I never thought it was released correctly. They should have waited. By the time they rolled this out, I believe it was first in October. Usually by October in the NFL season, we have a pretty good idea of who the top teams are going to be, who are the ones going to be competing later in the year. And it's too late, right? You want to release football games in late July, early August, when everybody still has hope that their team is going to go the long way. There's a reason EA Sports always releases that, Madden NFL at the time they do. And then why they discount it always at this time of year, because they know the time to sell it is while everybody has hope. Then once hope is vanished for most teams, if we're going to move more units, we got to discount it drastically at this time of year. And I just don't think Arcade1Up really got that or was willing to wait. They got delivered late, got whatever delays behind the scenes happened. And rather than waiting, they said, well, let's just push it out because we got it now. It was just too late. I think this is a cab done right. They could have re-released every single year in August, even with, like they love to do with NBA Jam. This is something every year they could have re-released, put different side art on there, capturing different teams, and you get the fan base of those different teams every time you did a new one, and just cycled through it over and over. But they gave up on this one so fast because of Sam's Club doing the super discount thing, and they just didn't stick with it. And I think that was a huge mistake, because that one I really think could have been huge, but they blew it. They released it too early, too late, and for that year, and too early in development with so many things undone. And of course, you get to MVC2, which for me I thought was great, but I get that most people bought this because they wanted to play online, and MVC2 just again didn't have online play out of the gate. And when it did finally get online play, it was terrible. Terrible experience. Still to this day is not a great experience. And so it was a huge blunder. And you had those back to back in the same year. Massive licensing, massive publicity, huge screw ups. And it just crushed Arcade1Up, right? It crushed them financially to do all those buybacks, as we've seen in other things. Like when these companies discount them, their deals were Arcade1Up would make up the difference if they had to discount them below the retailer cost to sell them, and these cost them a ton of money, specifically Blitz. So huge, two huge fuck ups that really hurt them, and you just can't forget that. A shack size Blitz would have been awesome. Yeah. It's definitely worth having, but should have been a flagship game for them. Absolutely. No Ms. Pac-Man XL. Yep, that never came out. NFL Blitz Shack Edition. What a wasted opportunity. No actual release without current rosters. Blitz and NBA Jam are two of my favorites and most played. I agree. They're great. I could care less about sports and did not get Blitz or NBA Jam, but y'all making me want one now. That's good. So for me, this was just sad, right? Because these were great. These would have been smash hits. I mean, we've seen them re-release MVC2 now a couple times, right? Under different banners, whether it's the X-Men 97 or the Kith stuff, they've done it. Sam's Club gave out late hits. Indeed, they did. If the option was Blitz or nothing, I would take this Blitz 100 times. Yeah. So that, we can't skip over that because that was a big problem. And of course, that likely led to this, which was the departure of the founder and CEO of Tastemakers and Arcade1Up, Scott Bacharach, and then, of course, Senior Vice President of Licensing, John Diamonin, leaving Arcade1Up under whatever circumstances they left, whether voluntary or not. I don't know, and I'm not going to surmise or opine on that. But somebody had to take the hits for that mistake, and whether they fell on their swords or the swords were thrust upon them, they departed, right? And that's really, I think, when you see the bean counters fully take over Arcade1Up and they start making really crazy decisions, right? It's not the end of it, but this starts a chain reaction of other issues. But there was one bright moment. After their departure, we get the CES of 2023 when Cyrus debuts in a hotel room. Of course, the deluxe cabs. Now we're getting no risers, right? Now we're getting more replicas. And this, even though they're all re-releases, it gives us hope. Oh, wow. They're going to re-release all that other stuff that they'd sold us before, but in these new deluxe form factors. And of course, then you got the XL Pac-Man later that year, which was awesome. And it's like, oh my God, all this is going to happen, right? We're told the year 2024 will be the year of the XL, and many people start selling off their stuff to prep for buying these things that ultimately never would come. But this was kind of the last hurrah, I think. This was the last thing that was like, hey, they made the improvements we've been asking for to get these kind of more true recreations and the right form factors and the right looks. But they never really stopped. In fact, these are the same cabs that are still out there today. The Class of 81, the Pac-Man, like they're still just selling these same things. And so it was somewhat disappointing. And then obviously with the departure of Scott and John, they quickly departed with Think Up. And then you have, right in 2024 and 2023, 2024, and even into 2025, we have Arcade1Up's series of lawsuits, right? Whether that's Think Up suing them, going through multiple cases, ultimately settling here in 2025, or it's Atari launching a lawsuit for unpaid royalties. Arcade1Up starts getting tangled in these legal battles that go on for a year or two. And again, distractions, they're not making new, they're doing the slim stuff. We start seeing the economy turn, right? And then we get Arcade1Up releasing this stuff over the last year or so with the Slim Cadies, with the NBA Jam, with the kickstand so it doesn't fall over. You've got the classic SEs, which started using a widescreen. So they start getting away. They got really close. They finally got what we wanted with the deluxe cabs, with that replica look in that size. And then they just turned their back on it and went away. And whether that was due to cut costs, to guard against inflation, or whatever the thought process was, I think Robert, their PR guy earlier this year, said their research said people in cities want thinner cabs. Like, okay, but they're not your customer. Let's be realistic. Not that people in cities don't want these, but the people they're trying to target with these thinner ones aren't going to buy those. They're going to buy partycades and countercades and other things. And now we're here, right? We're here to where that didn't work, quite frankly, right? The people didn't want the slim cades. They don't want them. And even when you made good ones, they weren't good enough because they wanted the deluxe style, right? And you just never really stayed on top of it. So now we're where we find ourselves today, on the verge of what we believe to be Arcade1Up's last days, with the rumors being that they're not leaked emails saying that most of their employees' last day is tomorrow. And so, for me, I wanted to look back on all of this, and I skipped over lots of stuff. We all shared a bunch of memories, and I'm really looking forward to hearing other people's memories over the next few weeks as we digest this massive shift in this space. I mean, this company brought most of us together, right? A lot of us created YouTube channels because of this company and this product. And well, we have lots of interests, and this isn't the end of this hobby by any means. There's Basic Fun, there's Iconic Arcade, there's G.I. Joe Gaming, there's many other companies, and I'm sure there's going to be even many more coming up. It's a turning point because this company formed the foundation of how all of us came together. And that's something I'll always be grateful for Arcade1Up for, even when I felt they made missteps and I maybe poked fun at them here and there. Everything I always said was always out of advice to them, whether it was done with snark sometimes or not. It was always with the eye of, I know how good this can be if you would just listen to some people who maybe have more experience outside your field in how to run a business or involved in these things. I'm not an expert in arcades by any means. I don't claim to be, but I know missteps when I see them. I know when you're not doing basic marketing research, when you don't understand your customer, when you're spending money like you shouldn't be. Like, why on earth would you buy and put an arcade in an NFL stadium? That was nothing but trying to show people how big your dick was. Nobody gives a shit. Spending that kind of money to 80,000 people for 8-10 games a year is stupid, just plain stupid. But it was all about, they got so much money so quick, so easily. They just didn't appreciate it. They thought it was going to just rain money on them forever. And unfortunately, they got them in more trouble than it was worth. They bet big on things they shouldn't have bet on. They licensed things they never should have licensed. We talked about that Atari lawsuit. We got to look inside of their licensing agreement with Atari. They were licensing clocks and all kinds of nonsense in the hopes that maybe one day they might release it. They licensed ET for crying out loud, like ET on the 2600. What does an arcade company need with ET on the 2600? This is stupid. Like, focus on what your business is, grow it, and then pivot to other stuff. So they were just throwing money around like it just didn't mean anything, and they ran out of it. And when they ran out of it, they didn't have the cash flow to support their operations, it seems, and now they're it's the end. So it's a sad day. I really feel for all the people that are losing their jobs, and that's really what it is. It appears the brand itself will go on. We'll yet to see if somebody can actually fulfill the promise that we hoped Arcade1Up would be and just never quite got there, but they did some amazing things along the way. And so I'm hopeful about what the future is. We'll just have to wait and see. So I wanted to take this last moment here to kind of go back, and I mentioned it earlier. Let's talk. I wanted to just take a quick moment to look back at the Arcade1Up Illuminati then and now. And I know I've missed some people that were part of the original group of Illuminati, but I thought this would be fun because mainly focusing on the people that are still around and looked at as the evil Illuminati. And I went back to their earliest live streams that are still up and grabbed some pictures and, of course, compare them to today. P-Dubs, right? Arcade Loft, one of his earliest streams, compared to one of his latest, right? Like all baby faced post our streamathon, right? So I thought that was fun. We've got Michael B, the Game Genie, some of those earliest. I think this is a clip from Super Game Room Dudes episode 1 on Michael B's channel, and of course a clip from his latest video. And before we go on, I give a big shout out to B Kirby with the $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. He says, if it wasn't for Arcade1Up, most of us wouldn't have affordable arcade rooms, and I definitely would have never looked Arcade1Up on YouTube, which caused myself and most of us to stumble across this community. They brought nostalgia. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Arcade1Up, whether you like them, love them, hate them, they've done a lot for a lot of us, right? And I wouldn't have an arcade room in my house that I get to share with my kids. It's made up now of stuff from Glenn, stuff from G.I. Joel, stuff from Retro Shooter, stuff from Buy Stuff Arcades, like stuff from Mystery Team Encoder and Mystery Encoder, and stuff from Unico and New Wave Toys and Quarter Arcades, like all the things that have spun out of what Arcade1Up did for me, like just launched a whole market segment that really was left to the very, very niche community. And we call ourselves niche, but the reality is Arcade1Up has sold more than 4 million cabs. That's not super niche, right? Like, even big retro YouTubers will occasionally talk about Arcade1Up because it is a company that bridges genres with retro gaming, and they made the dream for a lot of us that lived through that arcade era a reality without having to buy a really expensive, really old piece that we had to restore or know how to fix. You could get your favorite cab, even if you only bought one of them, and put them in your game room or your man cave or your office. You know, I've seen them in churches. I've seen them in schools. I've seen them all over the place. Like, these things show up all over, and it created they helped create this community, in my opinion. So have to give it to them. I'm going to wax poetic about this nonsense forever if I don't stop. Appreciate the gifting of 20 memberships to James Hates Everything. Really appreciate that, Jason. Very kind of you. Of course, you guys all get access to those members only emojis and other content out there, so be on the lookout for that. Again, really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Of course, we've got more Illuminati to look back on. And does this man ever age? 19K Fox. Again, one of his earliest live streams ever. I'll note, like, look how different the arcade is. Like all those Arcade1Ups behind him, and then no Arcade1Ups behind him. I absolutely love that. But come on, Fox hasn't aged a goddamn day. Like he looks exactly the same. He literally might even be wearing the same hoodie and hat. But man, he hasn't changed at all. So hat tip to him because the rest of us all got old. He looks the same. Joe Cade with the 9.99 super chat says, "Well done with tonight's installment, James. A true love letter to the fans, chronicling the entire history, good and bad, of A1Up, and the credit they deserve for all of this. Thank you, Arcade1Up. Really appreciate the support and the super chat, Joe. And be sure to check out Joe and B Kirby, all their channels. Lots of good stuff. I'd say go check out Jason's channel, but he doesn't have one because he moderates everybody else's channel in the world. I love this one. I wish I could bring up the emojis on the screen. Next up, of course, we got to take a look at Kongs Are Us, right? So there's one of his original live streams where he's working on some mod. I believe this one had to do with the outrun. And then, of course, one of his most recent live streams. So you can see he got a little older as well, maybe a little more fit too at the same time. But love looking back at some of these. It's pretty funny. Of course, console kits. Some people talked about console kits being at those early CES events, and that's definitely a clip of him at one of those. And then, of course, one of his newer streams where he's got all of his million fancy Stern pinballs behind him. Again, looking a little older, unlike Fox and all of these. So, just wanted to reminisce on those guys because obviously they were here for most, if not all, of the ride with Arcade1Up, and it's fun, I think, looking back on that, especially given some of the events of the last week with lots of people shaving their heads. And so that was our in memoriam for Arcade1Up. I hope you appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, having fun time looking back on Arcade1Up and all they did, good, bad, you name it. Without them, I think, like I said before, they've made a big impact, whether they know it or not. I hope that whoever takes over in the space learns from their mistakes and learns to do it better. I have lots of questions about the future of these companies. We've seen iArcade not make it. We've seen now Arcade1Up presumably not make it. We've heard lots of issues around AtGames and the layoffs that they've done and the cost cutting that they've done. The issues they've had with server issues, though that goes back even longer. So it doesn't look great for them, especially earlier. What was it? Earlier this week, last week, Mel Kirk on the Blockade, or was it Blockade Pinball podcast, kind of not talking too highly of AtGames there, which was interesting. Just a lot of things to be. Of course, you guys don't know Mel Kirk is with Zen Studios, so a lot of things like don't look great for them. Then Basic Fun comes out. Everybody had high hopes. They kind of let everybody down. They made the same mistakes Arcade1Up did and made new ones. They did a couple things well, got licenses nobody thought would get licensed, did the cam lock thing, but too many easy mistakes, and they came out at a premium price. So they got a lot to make up for, in my opinion. They're going to have to prove to me that they can rise above what they've done, because I was not thrilled at all. It was very disappointing. And now they have to prove that they can do it, because I don't know that they can. And I don't think it's their fault. I just starting to question. Of course, you have Iconic Arcade, which still hasn't launched theirs. It's delayed after delay. Now we're going on over a year. As soon as we get to January 6th, which this is, they've already publicly said late January, right? So we're already over a year at the earliest. So I'm really starting to wonder if it's viable at the scale that these companies are doing. I think is is this size product at the retail prices they currently are, $500, $600, $700, is that even a viable business? There's too much failure in the past, and there's a lot of people on the bubble, and you got to start wondering once they started getting up to these higher prices if it was just too much. And especially with the economy the way it is, with the RAM prices exploding, with inflation, with tariffs, like, can they make a go of it and still make money? Um, I know if I was Basic Fun, I probably wouldn't be looking at making an acquisition. In fact, I'd be looking the other way and going, do I even want to be in this space? Should I just chalk this up as a loss and just say, hey, it just didn't work out. We're not going to go down that road. Obviously, they're serious. They're apparently, from what we hear, they're investing more. So for us, that's good. It'll keep going at least a little while longer. Let's hope Basic Fun figures it out and we get what we want and can make this whole thing a success. But time will tell. Until then, I'm going to be playing games and enjoying what I got, finding new games to play, right? I got the Nova Blast I can be playing. I got Multicades. I got the ones I got, and hoping more mods and things come out to give us more enjoyment. More people like G.I. Joe come up and get us the cabs we never got. It's all going to be fun in the future, regardless of whether these big companies continue or not. There will be people out there making this stuff, and retro and nostalgia will live on in lots of different ways, whether that's analog or quarter arcades or New Wave Toys or some of these other companies. I'm still excited about the future, is to say this isn't the end. It's just the transition. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I know we went a little long. I hope you had fun, like I said. So you know how we do. Until next time, have fun.